this. So this is yours.
Okay, this is all work.
And this one.
A lot of IT.
Yes. Okay.
Too many hands. All right, thank you all. I've been a tech user for about 40 years, been a TUG member for about 30 years, but this is the first time that I'm presenting at a TUG conference. It's honestly kind of a pleasure to be here and to meet people who I've interacted with virtually, in some cases for a long time. I'd say Frank's book was a bit of a Bible to me when I was learning the details of LaTeX. Ulrika has been incredibly generous in answering my questions over the years. And I've used software written by many of you, including Nelson, Carl, and others. So thank you all for that. You've kind of built the scaffold here. I have to say, though, that I therefore approach this conference a bit like a graduate student giving his first talk to a technical community. So forgive me if I mess things up a little bit. Just to plug, I understand that my wife and my father are watching. Hey, folks. So let me see if I can operate the comm. There we go. So background on this. First of all, just a bit about MIT's thesis requirements. MIT has very loose requirements. There's a strict formatting requirement for the title page and what must be in it. There is a strict formatting requirement on the abstract page. There's an optional page where you can list committee members, but it's not required. The only other requirement is to number the pages starting at page 1. So to that extent, it feels kind of loose. MIT gets about 1,500 theses each year, the majority of which are in LaTeX. We're a science and tech institution primarily, and so many of our theses are math heavy and really need those features. The other interesting thing about that environment is that many of the people writing theses are first-time LaTeX users. Maybe a more experienced student has done 5 to 10 journal or conference papers in LaTeX. On the other hand, many of them are exquisite coders and absolutely fearless about diving into new syntax and sending me comments on the class file and so forth. So it's a diverse group. Now, we've had a thesis template in LaTeX since about 1987. It's written in LaTeX 209. That template was patched by a later graduate student for LaTeX 2E. And after 1999, there were really only trivial modifications made, just little details. And so it's been passed around informally. MIT doesn't really manage it. By 2020, the cover page no longer met the formal requirements of the MIT libraries. It was still set up for inked signatures, which we no longer used. And there are also execution problems. I never paid any attention to any of this because, of course, I'd already written my thesis. And I only ever got the print documents submitted to me. But in the early 2020s, the libraries went to PDF-only submission. Started during COVID as a temporary measure, and then they said, this is great, let's dump the paper. And that's when I started to get concerned. I knew from reading Tugboat that there were significant changes to LaTeX in progress that were required by legal mandates for accessibility, and that this was going to mean that a PDF-only format as they had it would really not work in the long run. And so I started looking at this. As you can see, I decided that the old code had to go completely, and I rewrote the entire template. So what were the goals? First of all, I wanted to make it easy for beginners to get an attractive result. I didn't want them to have to be fiddling around with the details of the title page and so forth. I wanted to use LaTeX as it exists now and as it will exist next year. So I've been trying to track the evolution of LaTeX as I'm writing. At present, I only am backward compatible to 2022. We don't really need backward compatibility for the following reasons. The students mostly have a short residence time at the Institute. The ones who have installed their own version of TechLive can be presumed to be able to update their own version of TechLive. And so I haven't thought that the backward compatibility is a big issue, and I've never encountered a problem. In fact, I've rolled backward compatibility forward. Originally, it was 2020, now it's 2022. Next year, it will probably be 2023. So I really want the students to use current code. The code is tagged, and it is compliant with UA2 and A4F with embedded CSS. I'm going to stop short of claiming that it is accessible because there still needs to be work on things like reading order and navigation and perhaps some of the finer details of WCAG that are almost, that really require human judgment rather than machine translation. I wanted to support a variety of fonts. I'll show you an example of how that's done. I won't get into the design options, but it's possible to load a file that controls the design outside the class. And after hearing Frank speak about templates, I realized that that file ought to contain templates so that the students can really do what they need to do there. Finally, tagging is supported only for Luau. I'm not trying to support it in PDF tech. The reasons for that are pretty straightforward. Luau is necessary for automatic generation of MathML, and our theses are math heavy, so that kind of ends that discussion. What I'm going to talk about today, I will talk about the required content. I will talk about the user macros briefly, how the students are putting in information. I'll give some examples of how XBEL3 code is used. That's mainly for the benefit of folks who don't already use XBEL3. I'm not claiming to teach anything dramatic there. I will talk a bit about what I've done with tagging and some of the challenges I encountered trying to think about how to put tags in a document. And then finally, I'll show some samples. So here's a typical title page. Title of the thesis, our author, Silas, getting a degree from the Department of Physics, a Bachelor of Science. He is retaining the copyright to himself. And of course, there's a required waiver to give MIT rights. And then in the block where the ink signatures used to go, we have Silas's name, his supervisor's name, the name of the person who formally approves the thesis for the department. The second column, Silas has proceeded to get a degree in a master's degree in computational nuclear materials. That is actually a real degree at MIT. It's issued by the Department of Nuclear Science and Engineering and the Center for Computation. So 2 departments, 1 degree, and that means that when we get to the bottom here, we've got 2 departmental acceptors approving it. When we come to this third one, Silas has acquired a co-author, Luisa Hernandez. Luisa has several previous degrees, which are stacked under here, including one from the Vulcan Science Academy and one from the Ferengi School of Management. And so down here, we have 2 author signatures. And in this case, they're using a Creative Commons license, making it more readily available. So each of these combinations has to go in a certain way. And if it doesn't, if it isn't correct, the libraries won't take the thesis. And that's where it becomes a little trickier. What I'm showing on this page in highlight are the things that the student or the user must provide. So obviously a title, they need to provide their name, the department they're in. If they have previous degrees, these are options. I've allowed for up to 4 previous degrees. I don't think any students have that many. And then for the departments, there's the name of the degree and the department giving it. If 2 departments give it, they can leave the degree name out here and put in the second department. The month and year that are allowed, if they're using a Creative Commons license, tell us what it is. And then, of course, we have the date they submitted the thesis, supervisor's name, title, optional department, acceptor, the person who approves the thesis, name, title, and department required. What you'll see about this page is that it's typographically very simple. It's centered blocks of text, vertical skips, and then down at the bottom, presentation table. And I've highlighted that. I want to call attention to it. This table is tagged as an ARIA table, which in principle will solve the accessibility problem that goes with using a table for layout. I think some additional work is needed there around reading order, but this is what's here now and validates. Now, here's a little XBEL3. I won't go into huge detail. The author command has the name, department, The optional degrees, if they're not given, these are just empty. This is fed into an expel3 command, and the expel3 command increments a counter, first author, second author, third author, and then it loads each of those 6 potential fields into its own sequence. So a sequence is essentially a numbered group of items, and so we're storing the successive author names in an author name sequence, departments, previous degrees if they exist, which then allows us to develop all of the content on the front page just by counting through integers, and it's all built with essentially integer loops. One thing that the page does, because you know how many authors there are, you can, for example, put in and or a comma as needed, plurals as needed, the author's release or the author releases. All of that is generated automatically. This content is typically processed by make title. So there's a fairly involved make title in this document. And you have to do it that way because you don't know until the end how many authors have been input, how many degrees, and so forth. Looking at this presentation table I mentioned, again, we've got some integers we're tracking. It's a tabular. We'll go through an integer loop up to the number of authors involved. And then we will put in, say, authored by, author name, author department, and the date, some space. If there's another author, we'll list that, and so on and so forth. And this will then terminate later. Class options for fonts. So the students have various choices. I set up 10 different font sets that they can call. 2 of them that I'm showing here are Heroes with Sticks for the math. Over here it's Libertinus for text and math. And you can get different appearances as suits you. Since there's no spec, it's really up to the student what they prefer to do. The font sets that are available work with, in some cases, only PDF tech, in other cases, only a Unicode, essentially, only Luau, I should say. And a few of them work with both if they're available, both as OpenType and as a PDF font. How are these done? Well, when we get to the document class, we have an option for a font set. They can pick, say, Libertinus. This will call an external file outside the class for that font. I'm not going to go into the details of it. It is essentially routine font setup with some switches to determine what engine is running. This file can be edited by the student. If they want to change Nabla to a different font, they can do it there. And if they want to use some font that I haven't set up, they can do that there as well. So it's really exporting all of that to the user. Options are handled by LaTeX new key value method. For example, this Libertinus would be stored in a token list and used later to determine what to load. If you want to load the line no package for editing, it'll set a Boolean for that, and that will be processed later. If you're loading the design file, there's a code that's executed that actually runs some tests and loads things a little more carefully. So it's very much similar to what you can do with other option packages, but it's native to LaTeX, and we don't need to load a separate file for options. Regex. Regex is fun. It allows you to hunt for characters and take them in and out of strings. So how am I using it here? This is a supervisor. This particular supervisor has many titles in several different areas. And so each of those titles might need to appear below the supervisor's name. And since it's a presentation table, tabular, I would load this using a // ampersand. And so on the title page, Secunda will appear with her several titles listed and a comma saying that she is one of the thesis supervisors. And it will work great. Now, the challenge comes when you get to something like this optional thesis committee members page. And the problem here is that Secunda's titles are now formatted. And what happens? Well, what happens is you have a problem formatting these active characters. So where do we go? We can look at the, well, let me back up a step. When I say they're formatted, you saw italic. They are actually emphasized. And the reason for this is that emphasis carries semantic meaning in PDF. Italic is just a font switch, and so it has no particular meaning and doesn't carry over. But by using emphasis, I ensure that when I go, say, into HTML, I will get an emphasized or typically italicized set of characters. The problem is that you can't put these in emphasis. So what I'm doing is I'm defining a regex. I put the double backslash into a constant token, and then with the regex definition, I say hunt for a double backslash followed by any number of spaces and an ampersand. And so we'll look for that. Similarly, we can look for a slash ampersand as well. When the list of titles secunda are put in, they're stored in a temporary token list. Regex splits everything when it finds the double backslash ampersand, puts it into a sequence. We also go through that sequence, and every place the student has used a backslash ampersand, we replace it with the word and, because this is a formal document. Departments and titles use the word and not ampersands. So that's stripped. And then finally, we'll go through the sequence with a sequence map, emphasize each element, and put these things out separated by a double backslash ampersand. So we've essentially torn the title list apart and restored it with the information we want. Here's another bit of XBEL 3. It's nice to have commas between successive footnotes. The very traditional way to do this might be to redefine the footnote command to have a future let at the end. The future let will then look at whatever follows the footnote command and store it in next token. The command is other f note will test next token. If it is a footnote, it will insert a superscript comma. And so we'll get the commas we want. Going over to XBEL 3 instead, we can use peak meaning. And so we can look at the following token. If its meaning is footnote, this command inserts into the input stream superscripted comma. And so this will come through directly. And then we can use the nice hook mechanism, which I really like, to attach the note comma to the end of the footnote command. And so it will test the next token. There's a little problem. You're inside the footnote command. The next token is the end group. And so you need an expand after to get that to carry through. What's nice here, though, is that we're not redefining footnote. And as I've looked at tagging code, I am more and more sensitive to not redefining LaTeX commands. All right, so making a tagged PDF. Everybody has mentioned, whoops, what did I do?
I hope you have nothing.
There we go. Everyone has mentioned, oops, there we are, the need to use document metadata with all the appropriate switches in it to get everything properly tagged. Of course, you want to avoid incompatible packages. That's been mentioned already. Some elements, particularly on our title page, require manual tagging. So I will show examples of how things can be manually tagged as we go along. And then a couple of things that, no, what am I doing? Am I totally not using the mic? Do I need this? I've been holding it behind my back, which makes me wonder. Yeah. So a couple of things that I encountered as a class author in thinking about how to get tags in. First of all, I needed to actually stop and understand the elements of PDF, the levels of PDF structural elements. You have groupings, like a div that wraps a whole bunch of stuff. You have block level items, like a paragraph or a part. And inside a block level, you might have an inline level, like a span. The significance of this is that if you issue a span, for example, in vertical mode, then your parent-child hierarchy of tags will blow up. At least it does for me. And so I found a couple of cases where I needed to affirmatively make sure I got down to block level, for example, by using leave v mode. The other thing that was important is semantic meaning versus typography. We do so many things typographically to convey meaning. That's what typography does. And On the other hand, not all of the typographic things we do mean anything semantically. I mentioned, for example, switching the font with text IT versus emphasizing it and putting an emphasis tag or structural element onto the group. Another one that I've encountered is the use of newline. So newline doesn't start a new paragraph, it just moves you down. And it's a really convenient way to stack all of a professor's many titles below their name. The problem is that when you convert this to HTML, those many titles are just a run-on string without any separation. And that needs to be looked at as well. So these kinds of things came up quite a bit, and it wasn't really until I was writing the paper for this conference that I thought carefully about the way I had actually had to learn about these details. So let me talk about the title page tagging. Now we're getting into manual tags. The whole thing is tagged as a section. I'm only showing the top bit, but I've made the entire title page its own section. We, of course, need to tag the title. And since I'm using my own set of macros here, I need to actually affirmatively say this is the title and do appropriate things with it as well to put the title into the metadata, which is also done automatically. Here, I wanted to tag the title strong so that it would appear as bold by default if it were translated over to HTML, and strong as an inline tag. So I found it necessary to leave V mode at this point before tagging the content strong. The author block as a whole, I've put that into a div, an author-defined group. The whole block of degree information, I've put that into a div. Obviously, it's arbitrary where I draw these things. And I picked ones that made sense to me, but I think as the use cases become more clear, the groupings of these manual tags will evolve. And so I regard that as a bit provisional. I mentioned user-defined tags. This has proven to be important for what I've been doing. So tag PDF lets you set a new tag. I created a div called author, a div called degree. I put a div around the entire signature block of the title page. And I also, for example, wrapped the nomenclature list in a div. And I'll give you some idea why as I get toward the CSS code. One of the things that became very important, and this was, I think, when David Carlisle started running the package through his parsers, you need to have a namespace defined for these user tags. They're not a part of the PDF 1.7 or PDF 2.0 namespace. And so I created a namespace here called MIT thesis that holds these things and allows the software to know what to do with them. So let's see what's happening with these tags as we get into the presentation table. I've mentioned presentation several times. So the tabular that holds the author's supervisor acceptor is specifically tagged as a presentation table. What that does is it gives it the ARIA role of presentation, and that tells the PDF readers not to announce that this is a table and start spewing out a lot of information that's not so relevant for a block that holds text. Inside this, I'm again counting through another integer loop, incrementing a step counter, and on the author by phrase, I'm putting a span around it. This phrase actually sits inside a table cell, a TD if you like, but I'm tagging that specifically because I want to manipulate this later. And so when I get to putting CSS into the file, I'll look for a div of type signature block. I wrap that around the signature block. I will look then for a table that has the ARIA role presentation. I'll go into a row, a cell, and I'll look for a span. There's only one of those defined. There's one for author, one for supervisor, one for acceptor. But for each of those things, I will then put a margin on the top because I want some spacing when this is rendered. Here's what it looks like. So I take this to ngpdf.com. in HTML with the CSS and those tags. Title page renders as shown. And you can see my half M of space separating each of these name blocks here. That's what that was about. You can see I've got a title that's rendering in bold type. There's a facility in the tag PDF for loading CSS. And so you can come in, make sure that you're using tagging, make sure the file exists, and then you can add to the list the file that holds any CSS that you want to apply when the thing is translated to HTML. Give messages if it doesn't exist. Continuing, incompatible packages have been, as those of you who've worked with tagging know, are a headache. And for me, the caption package has been a bête noire because not simply for this package, I have another class that I work on where the caption requirements are strict, not user selectable. And so I've wanted to control this. Over time, Ulrika has kindly provided me with several patches for caption that have helped me make things work. More recently, it's developed that we have a caption socket, a socket on the caption label, and also that we can add a hook to the caption command itself. So here what I've done, just for example, is to define a socket plug. I'm saying text color will be red, the argument will be in bold, and there'll be a quad after it, which gives me the label you see here. And then I'm hooking before the entire caption, saying I want a sans serif font. And so that hits both the caption and the label. If you wanted the label in a different font, you could vary a font selection in this command and it would override the earlier hook. So those things are doable. Of course, Frank, I know you're working on templates for this, and this is all.
New version at some point.
I'm going to have to do it over, but for this year, it's working, and this is what I'm doing.
That's great.
And I'll change it later. So.
It's really nice to see things happening this way.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, and so below the caption, so some of you, when you've set tables, you find the table caption sitting right on that top rule. I don't like that, and I usually manually put in a space. It turns out, though, that there is a hook after caption that you can use, and so you could go in and say, test, is the caption type table? Okay, if it is table, let's put in a skip. Then we get some space automatically. We don't have to go through and fix all the tables. So hooks give us all kinds of neat tricks that we can do. They are a great way to go. So I'll come to some HTML samples next. I want a drink of water. So you can see this. This is an AMS align environment. This is rendered as it comes directly out of LaTeX. And I've got an equation here that was relevant to my graduate studies, so of course it's kind of sacred to me, and I see it quite a bit. What you'll notice is I've got my vectors in an upright bold font. Mm-hmm. And you might typically do that just by calling mathbf. If you do that and then you render this into HTML, that bold will just sort of disappear. Okay. It's a font selection. On the other hand, if you use, we're in Luau, so if you use symbf up, that's calling a specific Unicode glyph, and that will carry over. So in this case, I've selected these Unicode glyphs globally. And Unicode Math gives us a class option that will always call math boldface from the symbol font rather than the text font. And so this is one thing that I only discovered when I was doing conversions. This, Ulrika, was a space that we discussed the other day. It's here because of a bug in someone else's code, not Ulrika's. And not mine. So I mentioned wrapping a div around the nomenclature list. On screen, nomenclature tends to be narrow And if you do it single column, it's very long. It's kind of typographically horrible. So when converting, again, to HTML, because I wrapped the nomenclature list with an identifiable div, I can say, look for a div of this class, find an unnumbered list, and then make it 2-column and put in a column gap. If you prefer 3-column, you could do that. If you don't like this at all, you could simply delete that CSS. Users can edit. This is the reference list for that particular sample document. This one is generated with BibLaTeX and some CSS. It's pretty much as it comes out of the box here for the active tech material. For CSS, I had to take some steps to ensure that the labels stayed on the same line as the label body. To get the indents, there was some work to make all that come out the way you see it. But the references themselves are exactly as rendered. And by and large, I think they came out pretty well. You have italic where you'd expect it. You have hyperlinks as you would expect them. The only thing I was disappointed by was in this paper, I had put in a little add-on to BibLaTeX to make the volume number bold, and that didn't carry through. And when I tried the most obvious fix, everything exploded and I had a mess. And I haven't taken the time to really drill into that one yet. But overall, it looks okay. Tables, so this is a representative table, again, as it's coming through the translator. In this case, as others have mentioned, you do need to tell the tagging what's the header row. And so here the header row is row 1. That will generally ensure that your header row has bold text. I found it didn't ensure that you had bold math. And since this is a math table, I had to add some CSS to say, in a table header row, all math children will have this font weight and a normal style. I'm declaring it important so it overrides anything else that wants to manipulate those particular fields. Boldface captions in the labels. So there's automatically a div called caption, and inside that there's automatically a span called label. So I can go in and say I want bold weight on the caption label. I can also go after that span with some more CSS, and I can add half a quad of space to separate them. So we have a lot of tools once we get there if things are properly tagged. One note, I noticed the tables are wrapped in a table body. They don't have a specifically called out table head. I don't know if that's important, but it's one of the things you find in CSS tables. And then here, I mentioned the issue of line breaks, and I'll show you what brought it to my attention. This is PDF. This is Silas and Louisa again. And this is the HTML rendering. Oh, and they've got another author, Thurston Howell III. That's an obscure joke that only some of you might get. Anybody here seen Gilligan's Island? All right, a few people. TV comedy from the 1960s in the US. And Canada. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, and elsewhere. Yes. So this is what happens to the previous degrees. Here we're using new line, and I'm setting Louisa's 2 degrees on a separate line, on separate lines. Typographically, perfectly sensible. Over here, because the new line doesn't mean anything, these wind up in a single line group. And if I hadn't put the period at the end of these degrees, this would all just smear together. And you would have to guess whether the master's degree was in 2018 or what. It would be quite confusing. So that's an area where there's probably more to be done. This is how I've left it for the moment. And then these are just a couple of more examples. This is to show you, first of all, we can get math to render in headings as we would like. Equations come out neatly. We have working hyperlinks for all the references, so everything clicks through as it should. This large matrix, I apologize, Carl, I think I stole this or a version of this from your huge document on math. I think also your version had h.4 up here rather than dots in each cell. There's an open issue on h.4 and tagging, so I took it out and just put these in instead. But otherwise it renders quite nicely, and large matrices. These are our superscripted, our commas separated by, our footnotes separated by commas. The commas are there, they're dropped to the baseline. Again, I'll say that's a bug in somebody else's code, not Ulrika's or mine. So, and I think those are the slides I prepared. I didn't expect to have time. There are a few extras. Is there patience? All right.
Go ahead.
I will skip past the closing slide. I mentioned metadata. And so it's possible, and I try as hard as I can to automate the metadata, because telling a student you need to put all this metadata in is going to be a problematic process. They want to write their thesis. They don't want to fiddle with these other things. So title, author, copyright author, all of those things are constructed by the class and put into a hyper setup within the class. One thing that's also done is to add the XMP copyright property. There is a facility for this in the current code. In fact, there is also a brand new user level macro that will do this, which I just discovered a couple weeks ago. But this is built in and can be done. When you come down here, then in the class, I'm declaring the copyright in a long string. The copyright author, if it was Silas, Louisa, and Thurston, would be built to include a comma after Silas, Oxford comma, and after Louisa. And then at the end, the last person, Thurston, there's a period here. You have a little problem if this person is, say, Thurston Jr., and the junior has a period after it, because you can wind up with a double period. So there's code to strip double periods as well. And then there's a very long statement here, also constructed to allow for one or more than one author, which announces MIT's rights in the document. So this stuff is all built in. I've also been patching a bit. I like to make the front matter and the back matter look differently. I should have mentioned, this document is built on the report class. So that's the basic framework. The report class does not have front matter and back matter built in. And so it's necessary for me to make some modifications. I'm patching list of figures to tell it to essentially to go look for, where is it, L at front matter as its style rather than L at chapter. And I'm patching list of tables the same way. And I also have a patch for the references to get the back matter. And the reason I'm doing this is I want them italicized, displayed a little differently than the main body. All this is currently being done with patch command. Again, I know there are templates in progress that will eventually tackle L at chapter and other things, so this code will evolve as time goes by. I mentioned the Libertinus font input file. It's nothing special here, but I ask if it's PDF tech, I'll go through loading the Libertinus new TX math packages with some setups and the bold math package, the BM package. If it's not, I'm going to assume that we're running Lua. We have a Unicode-aware engine, and then I'll load Unicode math with various font settings, Libertinus math and Libertinus serif. In this case, I'm changing the Nabla as well with one from Latin Modern. And the other font set files are similar animals doing similar things, but that's how that's handled. Let me see. Okay, I did something.
So I don't know that.
What's that?
It's on our end that thing did something weird. So
Oh, there we go. I'm back. I'm not going to go through details here. The images on the front page are coffins. And I use coffins and join them with poles in order to get the separation that I wanted at that point. It turns out that coffins are boxes, and that box tagging depends on where the box is used. And I thank Ulrika again for helping me figure this out. But these coffins, when they are set up, you need to save the structure, stash it. And then when you get down to actually typesetting these coffins, you need to issue each of their tags there. And so there's a delayed process to get that tagging to stick. So with that, I'm going to quit. This is MIT's mascot, Tim the Beaver. I assume he's a Canadian beaver. And this talk was put together using LaTeX Talk, Xcolor, and Xcoffins with the Heroes and Inconsolata fonts. So it's a talk with a colophon.
So thanks a lot, John. Interesting part for me. It's the first talk I ever saw where someone mentioned hooks and sockets and not from Frank. Great stuff. So, are there any questions? I guess. Not yet? Not Boris? Frank, do you have something? Want to add something? No? Okay, but Carl has something.
Yeah. So, John, I'm curious. Most of the examples you showed us were HTML, and you obviously put a lot of time into making that HTML look right. Why?
Well, first of all, I had to look at the HTML in order to check that things were being tagged and laid out properly. And I don't like HTML that looks like Netscape 4.0. Secondly, I suspect, in fact, I expect, that the ability to convert tagged PDF directly to HTML will attract its own attention separately from accessibility. And in particular, if I'm going to, say, go to people at MIT and say, look what you get from tagging, it's better if it looks nice when they look at it. But I want to be clear. There's more work to be done on accessibility. I'm sure that I've got UA2 here, and I'm pretty confident in the HTML I get. But for accessibility, we still need to look at issues related to reading, issues related to navigation, and for that, what I really need is a standard platform for testing. If I were a Windows user, I think I'd go to NVDA or JAWS. I'm a Mac user, and that's the problem. So
any further questions? Oh, a signal command from Frank.
Could be a long one if I get to it. I don't know. Very much appreciated. I love actually seeing things, not me talking about sockets and hooks. But that's precisely why we did those kind of things, because I think they proved to be relevant going forward and helpful. The small comment that I wanted to make was about your last sentence about you think you produce UA2.
yes.
And we think we produce UA2. That's not true.
Okay.
UA2 actually says you have to do the manual checks as well. That's part of UA2.
Okay.
So we are claiming by writing it into the file that this is UA2. The claim actually only gets as far as the automatic checks that we can do. So effectively, the standard UA2 has all these kind of extra requirements, if you like, that we can only tell the people to actually do. So yeah, we are all producing UA2 to the extent that automation can do it.
Yes.
Just as a...
That's a very good point, and it relates also
Now
to...
she's going to correct me.
Before you start, Ulrika,
No.
on the UA2, the WCAG as well, requirements like alt text must be comprehensible cannot be checked by machine. So please.
No, but I think as you got quite good HTML, I would be quite confident also about the accessibility of the PDF. So that's a good test to do. Checking the reading order with NVDA is good, fine, but HTML conversion already gives you a very good indication that you got the main structures okay and the reading order okay. That's a good, very good to do this.
Thank you very much.
So thanks, Ulrike. Are there any further questions, remarks, something like that? No? So thank you again, John, for a very interesting talk. And I think there is cookies outside. Yes, and we'll see you again at